Let's podcast alongside Joe Giglio. I'm Joe Ovias, inside Eford Studios, downtown Raleigh. Thanks to Empire Properties and thanks to Copiers Plus. Check them out online at copiers-plus.com. Get your print assessment today. Find out where you can save money for your small to medium-sized business. That print assessment is free, and the savings that come along with that, priceless. So again, check them out, copiers-plus.com. Have you started to use your Kyocera printer to print out the Warren Nolan team sheets so you can put them on the wall and have your own cosplay version of a selection committee? I could see you doing that. I could totally see you cosplaying that.
It's been done before.
FaceTime with Bubba. Like, hey, Bubba, what do you think? What do you think? How do you think this is looking?
No, you know what I need from Copiers Plus?
What do you need?
We need to start doing positive vibes only. The Josh Pastner weekly dose of sunshine on these ACC teams. I tried last night.
You did. And what does it do for you? I thought about this last night, actually, as I'm watching Wake Forest cough up a lead and lose on the road again. They're now 2-8 on the road, where I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe there really is something to the fact that when we throw some love Wake's way, they don't show us love back, Joe. Hunter Salas, this. What did Hunter Salas do last night?
He did not play well. I thought of Sidney Lowe, hockey expert, Sidney Lowe, philosopher, Sidney Lowe, 83 champion. Your best players have to be your best players.
Yeah, man.
Man, that was even, we had West Durham texting us in the middle of his game. I'm like, well, if Marcus Burton could leave my Deeks alone right now, that would be amazing. What a disappointment.
It is a disappointment, but also predictable as well.
There is, because there's a hangover. There's always going to be a hangover.
You know, we've given love to Brett Strelo, who's with App State now, but he used to cover the ACC for the Fayetteville Observer, and he had this court storm tracker every time somebody had rushed the court for Duke, right? But I'm pretty sure you had a yellow pad along with Brett. I think he also tracked this as well. What a team's record was after they beat Duke or North Carolina in a season-defining game that helps push them into the NCAA tournament bubble. I know your yellow pad stat was mostly about NC State after they beat Carolina or Duke, but this also applies to teams like Wake.
No, there is a Carolina blue. There's a blue hangover. Yes. Carolina Duke blue hangover. And I'm disappointed in Wake because in the sense that when you win the game that they did, like I said, that was the court storm and the celebration and everything, that was their release.
Yeah.
That was like, oh, okay, we finally did it. We're going to make the NCAA tournament. And the basketball gods last night were like, okay, you need to keep going. You need to keep playing. And I do think they play at a higher skill level. I think they have a higher skill level, a higher ceiling skill-wise than anyone else in the league. But then there's moments like last night where everybody was good. Everyone did their job, except Hunter Salas did not have the kind of game that they needed him to have. And not to pin everything on him, the end game execution for them, their last 4 offensive possessions, not after, they're throwing up free throws and stuff like that.
That's been a consistent problem for Wake Forest.
Their end game execution was really bad. Mm-hmm. And those are the kind of moments where if you are a dog, if you are that guy, you are Hunter Salas, you get the ball, you say, get the hell out of my way, and I'm taking us over.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't see it. And that's disappointing. I don't think, as the ESPN graphic had for Pittsburgh, Pitt's bubbles burst with loss to. No, this is not a zero-sum game.
It's not.
Okay,
it really is.
Can we stop with all of that?
We'll talk to Patrick Stevens a little bit later on, our resident bracketologist from the Washington Post.
But the disappointment is not following up a performance like they had against Duke, where they play at a high level.
Yeah.
And that's not to denigrate Notre Dame. I've been trying to tell you all year that there's not a big difference between these teams in the league. Yes, Louisville is sketchy on the road. Yes, Notre Dame has had their issues on the road. But if you look through the resumes and you look through the teams who are going to make the NCAA tournament, Virginia comes to mind. You're going to have some. Carolina comes to mind, losing to Georgia Tech down there. You're going to have some of these losses where you're like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, and to your point, Patrick can give us a little bit more information, and I do think the philosophy of Patrick will be true. That the prophecy, they're going to send Wake to Dayton, because if you look at Wake's team sheet, all right, I got it up on WarrenNolan.com right now. Their net is 27. Metrics wise, on the sorting tool, they look fine. you look at their resume, there's nothing on it that's necessarily bad, but there's also nothing on there that looks necessarily great if you judge it by what the committee supposedly looks at. 2-4 against Q1, 4-6 against Q2, but they're undefeated against quad 3 and quad 4. The big eyebrow raiser for Wake at this point, what they needed last night to not make it the shiny object, was their road record. And right now they're 2-8. But I'll get back to something we've talked about with Patrick consistently. And again, we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth. There's nothing on that team sheet that's so glaringly bad that makes you go, oh, well, last night just makes it so that they're not in the NCAA tournament.
Look, I want to be clear, though.
Yeah. There's two conversations.
There's two different things.
You're right.
Like what you're
right.
qualified for and some of the reality.
Sure.
Okay. We went and we saw Steve Forbes the night before they played NC State.
Mm-hmm.
I said to the man, I looked in his sockets, in his eyeball, and I said, and I even said to you, we sat there at a table and I said, he has a monster and he knows it.
Yeah.
If you're a monster, you got to show it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't about like what I think the road record is indicative of your problems in this, in what your problems will be in this tournament, because newsflash, while they're not road games, they're not games at home.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to figure out a way to play away from where you're super comfortable. But when I say about their skill level, when I say about what they can be, I posted this last night in my Josh Pastner positive vibes only rays of sunshine for the ACC. Their profile, their adjusted efficiency profile fits a national champion with Efton Reed in the lineup. Mm-hmm. If you're unfamiliar with Ken Palm and how it can be a predictive measure, the national champion, like all but one of the UConn years, goes into the tournament with a profile that has a top 25 adjusted efficiency offense and a top 25 adjusted efficiency defense. Mm-hmm. There are teams who can get hot with one. You know, if you're like crazy good at defense, you can get there. If you're crazy good at offense, you can get to the Final Four, but you don't win the title. Mm-hmm. It takes that balance. All of the champions in the Ken Palm era, which goes back to 2002, they fit a profile. Wake Forest actually fits that profile. Now I'm watching back. You said we do some air checks. I'm listening back, watching back, and I'm going, okay. Wake's other parts. Now, last night, their other parts played well.
They did.
They have to match Salas. Last night, it was Salas who couldn't match the other parts. So there is something there for Wake, and they showed it against Duke. But now you have to take that next step. And that's where the confidence, the continuation, I don't believe in momentum, but I do believe in confidence.
Yeah, it stacks.
And I think these end game situations are catching up to them. They're in too big of a hurry.
It almost cost them against Duke over the weekend.
Boopie Miller's an 85% free throw shooter. He misses the front end of a 1-and-1 in a must-have situation. Like, these are the kind of things I think it all gets in their head.
Yes.
And that's where I worry about them, because I thought the Duke was the breakthrough in terms of, hey, here's our release. Here, we did it. We made it, Ma. Look at me, Ma. And unfortunately for them, it's how do you handle it? How do you build off of it? Truth of the matter is, I have confidence in Steve Forbes that he can handle this because of the way those other players played. Do you see what I'm saying?
Maybe.
And I still think they have more from Monsanto.
Maybe.
Who's going through it.
And this is, well, I'll wrap my thoughts on Wake by transitioning to North Carolina, how we've talked about North Carolina.
Speaking of teams who fit the profile of a national champion.
But what does North Carolina do with all the stress that Carolina fans find themselves in end of game situations, or they didn't close the half the way they wanted them to close the half, or whatever it is?
They didn't have the Dean Smith first five.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Got it. You know what North Carolina has consistently done?
Find ways to win basketball games.
Find ways to win basketball games.
Without their fastball.
That to me tells me more about where you are on this trajectory to being good in the ACC or good in the NCAA tournament. Unfortunately for Wake Forest under Steve Forbes, this has been a consistent issue. I love Steve Forbes. I think he's great for the ACC. This is a great squad, but they have to find ways to win games in different ways. And it almost cost them against Duke. It didn't. It certainly cost them against Notre Dame. Meanwhile, NC State, down at Florida State, terrible atmosphere. There was nobody at that game last night for a 9:00 Tuesday tip at the Tucker Center. State's defense continues to be very mid, as the kids would say. I think the effective field goal shooting for the game for Florida State was like 58% or 60%, something wild. And it goes all the way back to the way that Kevin Keats talked about his team after the Syracuse loss. You can't come out and play like this if you know you're in the mix. Okay, well, you followed that up and you had a good game against Boston College. There's not a lot of opportunities for you left. Losing on the road does not help you. Losing on the road when you have a very difficult stretch of games to close it out also does not help you, because you go to Chapel Hill next on Saturday, then you host Duke. Now, home at Duke has been beneficial to NC State if history is any indication, but then you got that tricky Pitt game to close things out.
At the risk of being a dick, they actually have...
When has that ever stopped you, Joe?
They actually have a lot of opportunities left. The question is, will they be able to take advantage of them? They literally have 3 Q1 games left.
Right.
Like right in a row.
It's right in front of them.
I suspect what's going to happen is they lose to Carolina. Everybody and their mother is ready to run everybody and their mother out of the gym. They beat Duke here in Raleigh, and everyone's happy. They lose to Pitt, who is a very good team, playing good basketball and deserves to be in the NCAA tournament. Goes to Washington, wins their first game. Everybody's happy. And then they lose their second game. I could see the every other in Ken Palm. It's green for a win, orange for a loss. Last 4 games have been green, orange, green, orange. I could see that continuing to the end of this season. And then, it's going to be decision time for Buch Oregon, who, as we've talked about it, he hasn't been overly active in a public sense with the basketball program.
Yeah.
And which way does he feel is the best direction to go for NC State? And it's a completely different dynamic than when it was in 2017 when, Kevin was hired. So I could see it either way. I could see his decision and thought process either way. I do think the conversations that he's having are different than the conversations that NC State fans are having.
Housekeeping. Big thanks to Enovana for sponsoring Housekeeping. Keep up with them at enovana.com, enovana.com. If you've heard me talking about Enovana this week, my theme has been communication. Communication is key. I like knowing what's going on. I also like having people remind me because I can't remember stuff. I got an email from Enovana. Hey, you have a cleaning next week. Thank you for the reminder. They're on the way. They will text you to let you know, hey, we're on the way. Not a surprise. You hear the doorbell ring. You're like, oh, that's right. Communication is great. In fact, last week, they had a little bit of a technical issue when they came by last time. I guess the texting thing wasn't necessarily working. So somebody literally called me. Hey, it's Enovana. Just letting you know they're on the way. That is
service,
ladies and gentlemen. Customer service goes a long way. So check them out, enovana.com.
Yeah, that didn't sound like Chip Patterson yesterday. What a wild, sprawling moments we had with Chip yesterday.
That's always a conversation with Chip when he's in the studio.
It didn't sound like he was eager to do an Enovana jingle. So I have one more thought process. I'm going to shout him out right now. Bud. Our friend Bud.
Yeah, he's a musician.
If you can come up with an Enovana jingle for us, I will commission that.
So, all right. We'll make that work. With merch or actual money? It's negotiable.
Yeah, we're negotiable. We're in a negotiating stage.
Speaking of merch, check out breakingt.com/OG. Again, that's breakingt.com/OG. You can find some Ovis and Gilio merch. Both you and Kelly have given me shit this week because my wardrobe really has whittled down to just show merch and breweries.
It's not
brewery
giving you a hard time. It was more of like, I want to know if you do it on purpose. Like if you wake up, I don't feel like you're that type of person who's like, I'm going to wear Disney every day this week.
No.
I'm going to wear some random ass brewery every day of the week. And I say that because there's no chance of them ever giving us money.
From Odenton, Maryland?
The one yesterday, I was like, does that even make sense?
What, the Duke's Mayo Bowl?
No, the one yesterday was like Oast.
Edmonds, Oast, and Charleston.
Oast. Like, are they oats or are they Oast? No. Are you a coast or are you Oast?
No.
Dumbass name. And I'm sitting here rewatching the show going, where does he fucking come up with these shirts? So now I wanted to know if it's like an actual intentional pattern.
No, it just happens to be how.
Or you're like, okay, it's not like it's
how I
Disney
fold them.
week. These aren't my days of the week underpants.
No, it's not that. It's how I fold them.
Okay,
it's how I fold them and put them in the drawer. And it just
apologies to the Oats people.
No, they make great beer. They make great beer down in Charleston. No, but if you wanted a theme, is that this year of Junior Cane's travel hockey, it has been, let me just go hit the brewery.
When you stop and then you get a shirt
that's around the rink or whatever, and I'm going to just go get a brewery shirt while I'm there. And as I've told the kids, when I die, this empire of dirt is all yours. These shirts, all these vinyls. Joe, you get all the tchotchkes.
Yeah, I want the clock.
So breakingt.com/OG. Oh, another quick note too, when it comes to the podcast, we've been getting a couple emails about hey, what's the thing that can help the podcast? What's the best app to listen to? It doesn't matter. Whatever app is most convenient for you.
Oh, I thought you were going to say this is the part where you tell them to give us money.
No.
Yes. You can tell them that.
There's that.
There's always a correlation.
Right. I know that, but there's something that we've got cooking for the summer that will help facilitate that in terms of giving us money.
In the interim.
In the interim, you can use the donation button at Red Circle. But the app does not matter.
The app does not, you have to download it and kind of listen to what we need, 45 seconds or something.
30 seconds.
30. I mean, obviously more, but.
And you know what? Even if can't complete the podcast, just leave it playing. because the listen through rate goes up if you just leave it playing. I don't care if you don't want to listen to Hey Joe. Just let it play out, man. Just let it play out. No, I'm kidding. So it doesn't really matter which app you listen to because it all counts. It's all aggregate in the grand scheme of things. And the thing that does help, though, is when you rate the podcast.
Okay.
Give it 5. This is why I say 5 stars only, positive vibes only. If you give it 5 stars, you leave a review, it helps with the discovery of the podcast on Spotify and Apple and everything else. So please.
Watching on YouTube helps too. We do get paid for minutes played or hours played?
It's hours played. It's hours played. So again, that's all ways that you can help. You can also frequent our sponsors. You can buy a house or sell your house with Hometown Realty. Check them out, myhtr.com. New construction is the key, Joe. New construction.
So much of it around me on my way into downtown from Garner. It's amazing. And I think to myself, if I was moving into this area, what would I do to try to get in here? I would go to Hometown Realty. I would go to myhtr.com. You can buy, sell, calculate.
And if you happen to find yourself in some sort of traffic thing, like Joe does from time to time, hopefully I will not when we go to DC. If you do, though, if I do, Whitaker and Hamer. Check them out online, wh.lawyer. It's not just that. Let's say you're buying a house, closing a house, refinancing. They can handle that. Attorneys and counselors at law.
Shit, be happy.
Whoa, wait. I'm using... Why did I hit that one?
I like that one.
Shit, be happy we won it.
Yeah, shit, just be happy we downloaded your podcast, Ovias. Joining us on the Heaster Automotive Hotline is our resident bracketologist from the Washington Post. He is Patrick Stevens. Patrick, what's up?
Hey, fellas. And by the way, it's not going to be if you run into traffic in D.C. It's going to be when you run into traffic in D.C.
It doesn't matter. It's funny. When Kelly was summering at a practice in D.C. way back in the day, I remember I got on the road at night thinking, there'll be no traffic. Wrong.
Rookie mistake.
Does not matter. It does not matter what time of the day that you leave. It's always surge pricing on 995 when it comes to traffic. All right, before we get started, what's our bobblehead of the day, Patrick?
Bobblehead of the day in honor of Duke, Virginia this weekend. I see Gilio kind of wondering where I'm going with this. He's going to like this.
His Kellen. Oh, jeez. Does it
Duke
have
is Duke?
Duke is Duke. They're on
Duke is Duke. He doesn't talk, unfortunately. But
now did it just call a timeout?
I thought that was the appropriate way for them to have not just that, but like what are we, about 50 seconds into this conversation? That's about the right time for a timeout back in the day.
That is such a spare. These are reminders that there's probably a chunk of our audience young enough going, who the hell is Pete Gillen? And I don't get these references to timeouts or the Jim Rome clip that he would play all the time. They're on TV more than Liva Tabiva reruns. Speaking of reruns, we saw it again, Patrick, where a team beats Duke or they beat Carolina and they follow that up with a loss. I understand that we live in an age where every win and a loss is a referendum on your team and whether they make the NCAA tournament. I mean, it doesn't. I just kind of shoulder shrug with the loss to Notre Dame for Wake Forest when it comes to their overall resume. I know Steve Forbes said on Saturday after they beat Duke, they still have work to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a fair way of looking at it, but I don't know. Last night's, they're 2-8 on the road, but so far I'm just kind of like, I think your prophecy of them going to Dayton will ultimately come true.
Well, I'm certainly gonna come closer to doubling down on that right now. So if you're a team like Wake Forest and you had no bad losses and really no high-end wins, you would rather have gotten the combination of results in the last 4 or 5 days that you got than to have lost to Duke and to have beaten Notre Dame. And by the way, in another one of those bits of net magic, Wake's loss to Notre Dame dragged Notre Dame into Quad 2 territory when you play them in South Bend. So at that point, it's not even a bad loss.
No, it's not.
It's helping.
It's just one extra game. So it wouldn't necessarily be that way for everybody in terms of would you rather have that win or loss? Like right now, if you were Texas A&M, for example, and you were 6-6 in Quad 1 games, but you had like 4 Quad 3 losses, you'd probably rather just handle the business you're supposed to handle, and the other game doesn't matter as much. But because essentially what we're talking about when these last few teams in particular are being looked at is, what differentiates you, for better or for worse? What makes you look different than the other teams you're being compared to? And so, if you're Wake Forest, you now don't have that, well, they haven't beaten a Quad 1 opponent. So I think in general for the last few days, Wake's better off than it was a week ago.
All right, Patrick Stevens joining us on the Heaster Automotive Group hotline. Patrick, you're in DC. You might not know this, but you could sell your car to the Heaster Auto Group. I did not know this. I recently did. Made me some extra money. So keep that in mind if you're listening to this podcast. Now, your bracketology that you do for the Washington Post is a snapshot of what's happening right now. So how many teams, if the tournament started on February 28th, how many teams from the ACC would be in the NCAA tournament?
I'll having not done it since the Wake game last night, I'll assume that they probably still would just be right at the edge of the field. 5. North Carolina as a 1 seed, Duke as a 3, Clemson as a 5, Virginia as a 10, and Wake as a play-in participant.
Okay. How close are we, though, getting to the Giglio prophecy of 6? How close?
A lot closer than I probably thought it was going to be a few weeks ago. I think I had Pitt going into last night as like the 3rd team outside the field. So they're in kind of a group with Gonzaga and Colorado and a few others like that. So, Pitt has done good work on the road. And when we were talking about things that differentiate you, well, winning at Virginia, winning at Duke, those are things that differentiate Pitt relative to some other teams that are at the edge of the field. I just think there's probably a little bit too much minus at this point, but they have a definite chance to play their way.
I think the tournament in DC, I was trying to do my Josh Pastner sunshine last night. I think it's going to be really good. I think the tournament is going to be good.
Should be fun.
Like Syracuse, we don't talk about Syracuse. Why would we? Right?
Why would we?
But that guy's doing a great job.
What, Autry is doing a good job.
The other guy was such an asshole that you would, in real life, you would go, oh, wow, people love this guy.
Well, you're not appreciating the Jim Boeheim rehabilitation tour on ESPN?
No. He was such an asshole that in normal life, we would be like, oh, look at this great job Adrian Autry's doing. But we that poor guy can't even get that bounce.
Yeah.
And he has great guards. They have the kind of guards that win basketball games in March. Pitt, to me, is a tournament team because of what Patrick said about the road record, but also 1-5, they start in the league. I think we'll tie this into the bracketology. Patrick, I liked it when they used to have the last 10 games as a part of the criteria. I wish they would consider some of that too. How a team's playing down a stretch, especially now in this age of college basketball where your roster turns over so much and you really don't know who the hell you are in that first month of the season, but you seem to put so much weight on it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on the sense that we probably might want to think about based on the roster scenario there, that teams take a bit longer to figure themselves out at this point. And so, I also agree with you that especially the second and third days of the ACC tournament are going to be pretty good. I don't know if we'll get a great semifinal and final, but you're going to have Syracuse probably playing for something. They're on the periphery of that, and some of their metrics are actually better than you would think. Pitt playing for something, Wake playing for something, possibly Virginia playing for something. So not just an ACC title, which, I think at this point, unfortunately, is not as valued as it was 20 years ago or further back than that. It's nice to go win a tournament, but I don't think it's quite the same as what it was way back when.
All right, Patrick, before we get out of here, a non-ACC question.
Ooh.
We're going to take the stairs and talk about App State basketball. From our guy Hogwood, hypothetical for your weekly Washington Post guests with the bobbleheads.
We've given you a new identity, Patrice.
You got a hook now, Patrick. Mountaineers went out up until the SBC championship. and lose in a heartbreaker to JMU, who they've beaten twice, or Troy, do they have any shot at an at-large?
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's nice that I'm not Mr. Unanimous anymore in North Carolina. I'm the guy with the bobblehead.
Wow, speaking of deep
cuts.
today, jeez.
But anyway, I don't think that with those 4 quad 3 losses, the quad 4 loss to Northern Illinois, it's an uphill climb for App State. But I would say this, that I think the record for most wins for a team left outside the tournament is 28. There was a Coastal Carolina team that had that. So App State right now is what, 24-5. So you would be talking about a team that would be 28-6 if they won out and lost to JMU or Troy in the league title game. What I would say is, A, root for that team to be JMU, because that's probably going to help you. And B, keep rooting for Auburn to keep doing what it's doing for the most part. But I don't know if the committee looks past those 4 quad 3 losses, another differentiating factor for sure. Unfortunately, I think that JMU might actually have a better chance at it because, like I said, 28 is that sort of number that's existed in the past. And JMU would get to 30, say, if it won out and then lost to App State in the title game, and it has a win at Michigan State. I'm not saying Michigan State's better than Auburn. I don't think Michigan State is. But that road victory might actually help JMU's at-large chances a bit more than App State's with a home victory over Auburn. But I do like App State a lot, and I would love to see an App State JMU round 3 in the Sun Belt Final.
The only thing I will add to this is never forget, and maybe we'll have Patrick come up with a chart for me next week. There's always a designated mid-major in the first 4.
Yes.
They can say otherwise, but they save 1 spot every year in the first 4 for a mid-major. And if there's no other choices, maybe that's App State.
Can we find it in the budget to go to Dayton if App State and Wake Forest are there?
Oh, yeah.
I might join you for that.
We'll do the show from Fricker's Chicken, baby. Let's go. All right, Patrick.
Breeze through in Dayton.
Maybe we'll go on a prospecting trip for Adam up in Dayton. All right, Patrick. We'll talk to you later and see you in Dayton.
Thanks so much, fellas.
Next topic, please.
Mitch Northrum, NPR, USA Today. He's all over the place. He's got an amazing hat collection. He's joining us on the Heaster Automotive Group hotline as we move away from men's college basketball in the tournament to women's college basketball. Mitch, what's up, man?
What's going on? Thanks for having me. I'll wear my Montgomery Biscuits hat next time.
Love it. Next time, we're going to be talking about the women's ACC tournament as we get into the final stretch run here. I think the last time we chatted, NC State was running a little bit hot. Now NC State's running a little bit cold.
No. They're just doing the Lord's work. They're trying to help.
Oh, is that what it is?
They're trying to help poor Duke and poor Carolina get back on the horse and find their confidence.
Westmore loves the ACC so much that he's dropped games to Duke and Carolina back-to-back. Is that right, Mitch?
Yes, but not so much that he is not sad at all about not having to play either of them twice next season.
You have been tweeting through that. I know we've talked about this, and it does stink for the product as the interest has risen and the quality of the women's game has gone along with it, that we're not going to see these home and homes next year because, man, got to play Stanford, got to play SMU at Reynolds. Who says no?
Yeah. And I asked both Courtney and Wes about that. And they were both, kind of towed the company line and, this is good for the ACC. And now everybody gets to play State and everybody gets to play Carolina and the league will be more balanced. But like me, as somebody who's just a women's basketball fan and who covers this league, I want to see the best teams play each other. So I would rather see UNC and State play twice a year than State play SMU and UNC play Cal. Stanford coming into the league is great for women's basketball. I mean, that's another juggernaut, historic program that's going to be great. Might win the ACC their first year in the league. We'll see. But yeah, it's going to be a bummer that, when you think about the atmosphere that both of these State Carolina games have brought, and even the Virginia Tech Carolina and State games. I mean, all 4 of those games, incredible atmospheres in Chapel Hill, Raleigh, and Blacksburg. Sold out, all of them, all really good.
Wow. I really feel bad for the ACC, Mitch, because man, they would never be. This has never happened before ever in the history of basketball. Like, there's no way that they could get together, say in, I don't know, November, and go to Greensboro, just for example, and bring 4 teams there and have them play. I don't know. It's just so hard for me to connect all these dots.
I've never heard of that before. That sounds like a
what
really
the
intriguing idea.
workaround could possibly be for. Yeah, never mind. Never mind.
All right. So what is up with the Wolfpack having dropped these 2 games?
They've been inconsistent lately. They had one of their worst defensive performances against Carolina, and I think one of their worst offensive performances against Duke. Against UNC, State allowed the Tar Heels to shoot 53.4% from 3-point land, which is the best State has allowed an opponent this season, and the best Carolina has shot against anyone. So they were just kind of asleep at the wheel on defense there in Chapel Hill. And then against Duke, they kind of flipped the script and they played one of their worst offensive games of the season. So, yeah, and Duke's got a really good defense and they're going to make the tournament and they're a good team. But, this is a State team that was really dominant coming into, the middle of February. And now they've kind of lost back-to-back. They need to sort of regain their footing. They got another tough game on Thursday. Syracuse has really risen to the top of the league this year. They got a point guard in Deasia Fair, who hasn't gotten like the shine that Caitlin Clark has, but she just passed Brittany Griner for 5th on the all-time scoring list. So she's a bucket. She's going to give State some problems, but they really could use another win to kind of regain their footing. Then they're going to play Wake Forest on Sunday, worst team in the league. And hopefully they'll rebuild some momentum going into Greensboro.
And then the Tar Heel women went through a stretch that you're going, what the heck is going on? Excruciating ways to lose. They look like they've kind of bounced things back.
Yeah, that game they played against State, I thought was probably their most complete game of the season. It was really one of those games where kind of everybody got involved. Deja Kelly was more of a distributor than a scorer, and she was kind of, working her magic and getting everybody involved. And yeah, they shot great from 3. So that was their 3rd win in the row. Then they went up to Blacksburg. I went up to that game too. College game day was there. It was lit. It was really awesome. Like 9,000 people before a women's basketball game singing Enter Sandman was cool.
That was cool.
Yeah. But Carolina didn't show up for the first quarter. I think they got outscored 22-5 in the first frame. The rest of the game, they were really competitive. And I think actually won every quarter from there, but they just kind of got into a hole. So yeah, I think Carolina's kind of figured it out. And they should have a 2-0 week this week. Their final game of the season is against Duke on Sunday at home. That's always a big one. I think like the State series this year, they'll flip the script and get the win at home.
Mitch Northrum, NPR. We appreciate the time as always. Another check-in. We got the tournament, next week? We'll have to check in with you then.
Yeah, it starts next Wednesday in Greensboro.
Are they going to
8 or 9 teams in the tournament, you think, Mitch?
Yeah.
NCAA?
Is there a team that is in danger of a quick exit in the ACC tournament, or is it just kind of locked in 8 or 9 at this point?
I think 8 is a lock. I think Miami is kind of on the fringes as a bubble team. They could use a win or 2 in Greensboro. And then it's kind of all up to seeding at that point. I think NC State would do well to make the semis in Greensboro just to kind of make sure they got the hosting locked up. I think some projections have had them fall into a 3 seed. So just to kind of make sure there.
If you're NC State, you're like, how do we avoid UConn? How do we avoid Iowa? How do we avoid South Carolina? These are the things you're looking
The best way for NC State to avoid UConn is to get sent to one of the Portland regionals. On the women's side, we have 2 sites this year.
That's right.
I keep telling everybody, no matter what UConn is seeded, they could be 1st, they could be 4th, 7th, whatever. They are going to get sent to Albany. And there's nothing that will change that. Yeah. So if you're NC State, sorry, but your best bet is to go to the West Coast.
Hey, all right, Mitch. It beats playing on somebody's quasi home court.
This is true. Where's Nina King? Let's get her on the podcast again. All right, Mitch, we appreciate it. Take it easy.
Thanks.
lot of basketball talk today. Don't worry. We'll do our SEO obligations to talk about football here in a second. But before we do that, let's talk about State Farm. Matt Davis, InsureGarner.com, TheOGInsurance.com. Call them 919-779-8277. Or if you're watching on YouTube, hold your phone up to those QR codes, and it'll take you directly to Matt Davis. That, folks, is customer service. That's a person here in the triangle.
Save money. Who doesn't want to save money? Okay? So let's go 919-779-8277. Give Matt and his crew in Garner a call. I'm telling you, one conversation. One of our listeners, Troy, saved 40% home, auto, different insurance options. So do yourself a favor. Go save some money. Go to theoginsurance.com.
Also, big thanks to Homefield. Speaking of saving money, you can save 15% off your order. Go to homefieldapparel.com. They're dropping new stuff all the time. They just did a Hendrick Motorsports collab. It's pretty freaking sweet, not going to lie. But I have to save money in the budget for more comfortable, like Rob Lowe style NFL hat hoodies that just say Homefield on them. So that's what I'm going to do. But anyway, the Homefield hoodies are absolutely fantastic, and they got great designs for all your local favorite schools. So go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. Again, that's homefieldapparel.com. Now, let's refresh the audience's memory, Joe. What did you call Drake Maye as we get ready for the draft talk?
So back in October, I predicted and compared Drake Maye to Phillip Rivers.
I thought Josh Graham did that.
Back in October, I pointed out that ultimately, I think Drake Maye is going to play in the NFL for a long time.
Sure, yeah.
I think he's a very good quarterback. I think he's a really good quarterback. I think ultimately, and he's also very popular with Carolina fans, obviously not for the same reasons as Phillip Rivers. You know, Phillip Rivers was here with Chuck Amato, played for 4 years. 4 straight years, set all kinds of records, but ultimately didn't win an ACC title. Didn't get them. You know, they did win 11 games, which is a school record, but they didn't play in a major bowl.
They lost in that Micron PC Bowl that
different team.
That was a different team. That's right. That was 98.
They beat Minnesota in the whatever that was version of that they called it.
That was 98.
But you know, he was a popular guy, super popular guy, revered, legend. Phillip Rivers is a legend. Drake Maye, for all of the similar reasons, you know, but I obviously have the family connection to Carolina. I think he's a guy who's going to be revered for a long time. He is a legend. He will be a legend at Carolina. I think he'll play in the NFL for a long time. I think he could start like Phillip did for 15 years for a franchise. But ultimately, we're going to look back and go, well, why is Drake Maye so popular? Never, you know, they did win a division, but that's because the divisions were horseshit. And his teams ultimately underachieved at Carolina. So those were my similarities. They're similar in build. Obviously, Phillip had the wonky release.
Which the best thing that ever happened to Phillip Rivers is that nobody messed with the wonky release.
All-time great stories with Norm Chow.
Right.
So, you know, I think there's some similarities there.
What if I told you that Phillip Rivers and Drake Maye now understand that they are the Spider-Man pointing meme for NC State and North Carolina? What if I told you Drake Maye went on with Adam Schefter this week and talked about who he's working with in preparation for the NFL draft?
Now, you're down in Mobile, Alabama. You say you're training. You're working with Bo Nix and others. One of the guys I know you've been working with is Phillip Rivers.
Yes, sir. Yeah, he lives right down here.
Yeah. What have you learned from Phillip Rivers? He's a great guy.
Oh, God, he's one of the best. You know, he's just like, you might as well just my brothers. You know, he's just loves to compete. You know, he's out there with throwing, 6-step outs, like a 10-yard drill thrown into the net. And he retired for 2 or 3 years ago, and he still won the competition. So he's just a competitor. And just not like that, he's just one of the guys. He gets along with people so well and knows the game. He's a little bit in the digit system, with San Diego. So just picking his brain on that. I know there's a little bit of different systems in the NFL. So just trying to be a sponge, ask him questions, ask him what it likes. I think the biggest thing about Phillip was he stayed healthy for so long through his career. Such a long career, and I think he played 17 games for I don't know, some crazy stat, 15 straight years or something. So just picking brain how he stayed healthy, and he's a big dude like me, so just trying to kind of find ways to relate to him. And both ACC guys. I know he went to the wrong school in the ACC, but some of that same stuff. So just trying to pick his brain. One of the great quarterbacks.
There it is. He went to the wrongs. I was waiting for the NC State Carolina thing to come up. I had a couple of takeaways there. He's learning a bunch of things. He has a bunch of questions for him. I do wonder if Drake Maye said, man, yeah, like how many kids now? 15? How's that possible?
No, he doesn't have that.
Your insurance pay for all that? Can you feel the team yet?
Soon.
Basketball team? What are you doing here? But I thought that was a great clip.
They could go 5-on-5.
Yeah, you can.
My number one takeaway, first of all, like good for Drake Maye. Like you're trying to learn. You learn from people who did it. You learn from people who look like you in terms of like, hey, his body size, his type. Like, how did he do it? I want to learn from him.
Yeah,
that's smart. Number one. My real number one takeaway. Adam Schefter's making $1 gazillion from ESPN.
Yeah,
our setup is 8 million times better. That is some hostage situation background for a guy at the worldwide leader, and I'm guessing he's broken that off, and it's not under their umbrella.
I think it's
is he trying to do one of those?
No, I think it's under the Omaha Productions things. Don't take me for word on that, but there's a licensing thing.
Listen,
where Peyton's Omaha Productions is doing this.
I'm feeling bad about our tax situation and some of our financial situations. And look at this production, sir. Look at this presentation, sir. You take that, Schefter.
Shefty doesn't have
You can't even touch this swag.
Schefter does not. Schefter's using, I don't know, an old Chromebook camera.
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
I mean,
something ridiculous.
Amateur hour.
I mean,
what on earth?
Here I am thinking, it might be time to upgrade these cameras because these Amazon specials, these Razer Kaios, I don't know. I mean, they came out with a 4K version.
Razer Kaios are like freaking Scorsese.
Also,
compared to that,
Ethan helping with the lighting also matters as well. That certainly helps out. Now, my other takeaway with this, with Drake Maye and Phillip Rivers, is yet another example of how these guys do not feel it the same way fans do on a day-to-day basis. Yes, Drake Maye gave us the requisite, he played for the other school, whatever. Do you think they really talked about
wrong,
that?
But yeah,
the wrong school. Do you think he really said that? Like, do you think Phillip Rivers and Drake Maye, maybe there's some shit talking that takes place, but in the grand scheme of things, man, these guys have one thing in common and one thing only. They want a ball. They play football. They're going to swap stories. And that's a cool story for Drake Maye. My only question about this before we move on. If Drake Maye succeeds in the NFL, unlike other North Carolina quarterbacks
who did not seek out the tutelage of a Pac Pro,
does that make Drake Maye an honorary Pac Pro?
Makes you think.
Just saying. I mean, there's ties there because you remember his dad played at Carter Finley Stadium too. Just saying.
Professionally. Yes.
Some of Luke May's great moments happened at PNC Arena.
I mean, not all of them, but
so the point is, the Kentucky shot, whatever.
But
never forget, he broke Omer Yurtseven's ankles.
Broke his will.
So yes, I'm going to declare it here. If Drake Maye is successful, then I expect him on Sunday Night Football when they do the introductions and all that other stuff. Drake Maye, North Carolina, Pac Pro. That's what I want to see. Dave Canales, speaking of Carolinas, Dave Canales, Carolina Panthers head coach, was available to the media yesterday to talk about a variety of different things, contract situations, updates, XYZ. But the one thing that I thought was interesting was the commitment to the bit from Canales about how they want to run their offense. And there was a quote that was floating around. I don't have the clip in front of me, but it's essentially, you're going to be shocked how stubborn I am in wanting to run the ball. Isn't that a concept? Something that the Carolina Panthers didn't really do under Frank Reich. And then he was asked a question about Bryce Young and whether or not he needed to be, quote unquote, fixed. I thought his answer was interesting.
No plan to fix Bryce Young. I think for me, it's about building an offense that we can be proud of, something that is tough, something that is smart, that takes care of the football. Number one, we got to create more explosives, and then of course we have to minimize damage with exotic pressures and things like that. So I think just elevating the whole group, and really asking Bryce to just do his part.
So that's Dave Canales at the NFL Combine media availability. You've got that smirk on your face.
Well, sometimes things are crystallized to me, and we talk about different generations, right? Dave Canales there could have been like, "Oh yeah, I'm sweeping in just like I did with Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, and this is how I did it, and this is how we're going to do it." He easily could have said all of those things.
He did. There's an additional clip where he does talk about some of the things that happened in Seattle. I mean, he wasn't taking full credit, but he was naming other guys. Here's our process. Here's what we want to do.
Or he could have gone the other way. We just saw Rick Pitino absolutely undress his roster. 70-year-old Rick Pitino absolutely badmouth and berate and obliterate his own roster. This is the old school, right? So he could have gone that way too, but is that going to work?
No.
With no background, without the national championships, without the crazy white suit, is all of that going to work? No. So what's he trying to do with Bryce Young? He's trying to connect to him intellectually. He's trying to say to him, I don't need to fix you.
He doesn't need
I need to put you in a position to be successful. And, quite frankly, that's the type of messaging that the Panthers do need. Now, Dan Morgan needs to get to work to help Dave Canales to make the pieces around Bryce Young work. It starts up front. We've talked a lot about that premium asset. You might not think of it, but the 33rd pick in the draft actually is a premium asset for a lot of different reasons. So they need to do the best that they can do with that asset. They need to fix their offensive line. This is the NFL. When they say not for long, that also means in the rebuilding process. The Panthers, while yes, a complete and utter disaster last year, I don't think they're as far away as many people think.
So to that point, there's been a consistency from David Tepper and how they've gone about this rebuild in the front office and the coaching staff. And it's almost you broke it, you bought it when it comes to Bryce Young.
Yeah.
It's two separate conversations. Did they overpay to move up and get Bryce Young? Yes, that has been answered. We know this. That's no longer up for debate. But it's in the past. You have Bryce Young. Does Bryce Young need fixing? No, he does not. What he needs is a competent coaching staff that's going to build around him. That's always been the point. If you have him, then you have to make it work for him. And that comes down to how you structure the offensive line. It also comes down to how you structure who's around him. They clearly missed on those guys last year when they went through free agency and picked up assets that they thought would make him the point guard. And I'm starting to, as much as Bryce Young's season was forgettable, I do think that the further we get away from it, hearing Dave Canales talk, seeing how they've retooled things, how much of a mistake it was to hire Frank Reich in the first place, and how they structured the coaching staff. And it gets back to a report from Jonathan Jones midseason where there was too much noise in the room. When people misconstrued JJ's reporting in simplifying things, as though Bryce Young couldn't handle all this stuff as the S2 cognitive wonder boy. That's not what Jonathan was saying. And what we come to find out is, no, what they had to simplify was all the damn voices in the room having an opinion on Bryce Young. And you just got to let him cook. You want to tie it back into the Russell Wilson stuff in Seattle, Geno Smith, all that kind of stuff in Seattle. There was that big movement to just let Russ cook, man. Just let him do his thing. I'm not saying that Bryce Young is on the level of Russell Wilson and that whole, like, he's going to scramble, everything's chaotic, everything's going to fall apart. Oh my goodness, there's a touchdown. What I'm getting at is, at Alabama, you saw the ability. In Carolina, they stifled him and made it so that you really couldn't see that ability. It's up to Dave Canales and the coaching staff to make that work now.
Look, first of all, Bryce Young had an alpha and an omega situation.
Yes.
At Alabama, he had every single situation. Everything was perfect.
Right down to coaching.
Every effing game was a sunny day. Okay. And I said this. I'm only bringing this up right now to remind everyone that I told you this.
Yeah.
And at Carolina, it was, what can you do in scramble mode? What can you do when the lights aren't on? What can you do when it's not a sunny day? What can you do when you don't have an advantage?
But here's where I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think he was ever allowed to do that. I think I really do think they gave him so much and it became such vanilla.
Right, but it's not an indictment of him.
Okay, yeah.
It is the circumstance that he was in.
Got it.
He went, if it's like a test situation, right? Like, here, we're going to put you in this group test where everything's perfect and every situation is great. Then we're going to put you in this situation where everything's shit and a disaster. And what happens when you do all of those things? The reality is, life is probably somewhere in the middle for Bryce Young, just like it is for all of us. It's not always going to be sunshine and roses, and it's not always going to be shit, right? Second part for the Panthers is this. They have to keep firing in the draft. And that means you have to have the draft picks to keep firing. But all of these people with revisionist history when it comes to the Houston Texans, no one was talking about Nico Collins at the draft. No one was talking about Tank Dell at the draft.
No.
These are third-round picks who have gone and now helped CJ Stroud tremendously. You have to keep firing. Just because you missed on Mingo doesn't mean you don't take receivers. In fact, I would trade that second pick. I would move down, and I would take 3 receivers in this draft because at some point you're going to hit.
One other clip. This is from our friend Jonathan Jones, who we're scheduled to talk to next week. He sat down with Canales, and he had basically a quote about marrying the run to play action better and getting the ball out quicker to the top targets. It's all basic stuff that really we didn't see last year.
David, we have time for one more question here, and that question would be, of the things that, let's forget about Bryce, who is unforgettable, but what really, truly, when you watched the tape, when you took this job, did you say, I can go in there and I can change that? I see the potential, and let me get my hands on it.
Yeah, so the first thing I would mention is the defense. We have so much carryover with Ejiro being there, leading the defense, a few big pieces on that side of it that give us a chance to play the type of football that wins. Offensively, we have some great pieces, but it's about marrying the runs to the play actions and to the boot game that really wasn't a focus and an emphasis of what they were doing offensively. So I think that's a simple starting point there. And then just the timing and rhythm of the pass game. You know, let's get the ball out quicker. Let's get number 1 and number 2 open on a more consistent basis for the quarterback. We have to work harder as a staff. We have to really challenge ourselves to bunch, to stack, to motion, to get matchups so that we can have the first or second progressions available sooner so that the protection isn't as much a factor.
You're laughing over there. Chuckled.
Yeah, you punch, stack, motions. I mean, you gotta scheme it up. And you know, preseason game last year, I thought they did some good stuff with some play action. He was more effective when you couldn't guess what the hell's going on.
Right.
I mean, this is all football 101 stuff. Yeah. And unfortunately for them, when you said that, did they hire the wrong coach? I think Frank had an idea of what he thought the offense should be, and that's not what that didn't fit what the personnel was.
What do I always say?
Yeah, you got to coach the team that you have, not the team that you want.
It was abundantly clear that was the case. And again, I'll finish my point by hammering the fact that there was confusion over even who was going to be the play caller because you had a head coach who was stubborn as hell and didn't want to give it up.
And the injuries up front with their offensive line.
Sure.
So, you know, you got to fix that offensive line. They don't have great skill players, but it wouldn't surprise me if some of them in a better scheme don't turn out to help Bryce Young in year 2.
Big thanks to Longleaf Swine for sponsoring Ovies and Giglio downtown Raleigh. Parking is super easy. And most importantly, be ready for our tournament extravaganza. March 21st, Thursday, 1 o'clock. We're doing the live show, 1 o'clock from Longleaf. Hang out with us. Watch Giglio lose his mind trying to watch games and do a podcast at the same time. And we'll find a way to get bourbon in your hands.
All right. So I know a lot of people in the state of North Carolina are looking forward to March 11th. I am too. But the real date is March 21st.
Yes.
That's when we'll be at the Longleaf Swine on the corner, Edenton, Person, right by the Federal Post Office. Parking on Edenton. There's always money in the banana stand. There's always parking in Edenton. The Frito pie is your friend. The shorties are your friend. And the chicken pot pie is definitely your friend.
I almost had that the other night because we had gone on Friday, but I ended up with the burger because I can't say no to the burger.
I know. I love it when you don't listen to me, but I think once you ultimately do, you're going to give me my favorite words.
Giglio was right. We're right about bundling and saving and getting great pest service. That comes from Mosquito Authority and Pest Authority. I know when it comes to Mosquito Authority, if you prepay now, you save. So get ready for the season. Go to bugsbite.com, get up with Mosquito Authority and Pest Authority. Again, that's bugsbite.com. It's a low-key busy night in the world of sports last night. Carolina Hurricanes get the win over the Minnesota Wild. It wasn't exactly the prettiest game. A nice gritty goal early for Jordan Staal. I know Trip Tracy made a big deal about the
score
Stalls
any
being
other
there.
variety.
I know, right? That's really going to help with Jordan Staal. Eric's in the building. They had dinner. You know, Trip was joking about how maybe he needs to go to Eric's for dinner all the time. But the things, it was a back and forth for the most part. Steph Nason ends up getting the game winner with about 9 minutes to go in that game. Hannah Yates, Bally Sports, setting things up for Rod Brindamore.
Rod, we just spoke with a couple of the players who said the mentality was just find a way to get 2 points, even if it's not the prettiest win. Yeah. What were your initial takeaways?
Well, that's pretty much it. It certainly wasn't a pretty game. We started out really well, and then we got a penalty there in the first period, and it kind of got them going. And then it was just a struggle, just to get our game going. But I give the guys credit. We battled and found a way.
Found a way, man. That's kind of the theme of the show today. You got to find ways to win. After the weekend, where they dropped some games they wanted back, they didn't like the style of play. I'm guessing this is a building block for this road trip to get things going. That's neither here nor there. The curiosity that I have is ticket prices. Ticket prices were trending yesterday for a variety of reasons. We talked about the Panthers. The Panthers have been terrible.
The Carolina Panthers.
The Carolina Panthers have been terrible.
Just to be clear.
I know, you're right. I have to make sure that I'm not.
Since we're in hockey.
I'm not an ESPN app putting the wrong logo next to the appropriate team, right? So the Carolina Panthers announced that they're raising ticket prices by X amount of percentage points based on where you sit, PSL, all this other stuff. And of course, people were reacting in such a way of going, excuse me? You're doing what now? Okay. Nobody's there for those games. Meanwhile, the Carolina Hurricanes also announced through their season ticket pricing that the price of the brick is going up. Now, it makes sense on one end because the Carolina Hurricanes have been good. Therefore, there has been a demand and supply thing going on, and you can raise those prices to watch this team be successful. I do think that the Carolina Hurricanes are sort of generating an interest in season tickets that isn't necessarily like they're limiting season tickets. They could probably sell more season tickets. They've tinkered with plans, but there's also a different space. They're in a different spot than they were 10, 15 years ago, where you could pick the games you wanted to pick. You could have your college nights. They are in the business of making money, and they're going to find ways to extract that money. Now, you're going to have to make some decisions because we're seeing this happen in Winnipeg, too. This is where the other ticket price story comes in, right? In Winnipeg, there's this bizarre...
Winnipeg's still in Canada, right?
Yes, okay. Yes. There's this weird crisis that it got to the point where Commissioner Gary Bettman had to address the issue because the owner of the Winnipeg Jets saying, hey, if this doesn't turn around, we're going to have some serious conversations. In the bizarre plot twist, it's the Canadian team that suddenly finds itself in relocation rumors because there's not enough bodies in the building to go watch hockey. Bettman had to come out and say, whoa, 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 whoa. It's not like we're on a razor's edge here when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets and whether or not they're going to last in this market. Of course, there's the ticket price. I think there was a story in The Athletic about what a family of 4 has to pay to go to a game. Y'all, it's expensive. It's expensive. There's only...
Wait a second. The Jets are in first place in their division and they're not selling...
And they're not selling tickets. They're not selling. Dude. Could it be that it's too expensive?
Yeah.
Could that be the case?
But no, I mean, going to a game is very expensive.
There's only one way to say this. And
if you want to go by yourself, maybe, but
yeah, maybe.
Even then,
look,
you can't get out of the building. I'm telling you, man.
Well, without spending what?
If you went to a game by yourself,
yeah.
If you went to a game by yourself with free tickets and free parking, if you got out of there with less than $50, I'd be shocked.
Free tickets. So if I just went with my press pass and my parking pass.
Yeah.
But didn't sit up in the press box? Like
right.
Actually just wanted to sit in an empty seat somewhere?
If you went to a game, like if your friends were like, hey, let's go to the game. And you're like, okay, you do it that way. Your friends have a ticket for you. Mm-hmm. You have a parking pass.
Sure, I meet them there.
So you meet them there.
And I'm sitting in the lower level.
You're sitting in the lower level. And you're like, no, especially if you're going with your friends, there's no way you spend less than $100. Because you're going to buy everyone who gave you a ticket of beer.
Oh,
you're going to get one round of beers.
That's different.
One round of beers is $100.
That's different. That's different.
What is it?
No, if you're asking how much could you get out of there, I could literally get out of there without spending any money if I got a free ticket. I'm just saying. Like, I don't have to have a beer at a game. I don't have to. Now, if I am going to partake, I'd drink 2 beers. 2 beers. That'll cost me what, $30-$40 with tip? Is that where we're at right now?
$45 probably with tip.
I mean, because the Storm Brews aren't $7.50. Storm Brews aren't $5
beers, you're
anymore.
probably gonna have a water.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Here's my curiosity, and I'm not an economist, so I don't know the answer to this. But we're starting to see this play out in, non-sports, where people are pushing back on the greedflation, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Like McDonald's shouldn't cost what it costs.
I went
like
to a certain chicken restaurant the other day. It was $14 for my regular combo. And I was like,
right.
Excuse me?
And of course, you see the reports where they're screaming, they're touting their record profits. What is, I think it was Wendy's that announced, it's getting roasted, but Wendy's announced the equivalent of surge pricing.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
Here's the thing about
if you don't come at lunch.
Right. So you show up at 2:00 to get your Baconator, you should be fine. You know what's funny about that? That's all poor messaging, because what Wendy's is trying to do is what other places have done. They call them happy hours. All right. Surge pricing. People just do it in inverse. They look at the hours in which people don't necessarily hang out, and then they charge a lower amount of money for goods so that they get butts and seats. That's how, what do you think happy hour is, man? It's just to get people to drop by after work.
Which I still don't think is legal in North Carolina. If you do it, you have to do it for the whole day. Is that what it is?
I think you have to do it for the whole day. Again, I'm not an expert on that, but in just kind of picking things up and doing the Vice podcast, I'm pretty sure that, you have to do it for the entire day. But the point remains, you can do variable pricing at these restaurants without any problem. By the way, variable pricing exists in sports. The Carolina Hurricanes got kicking and screaming to get people to used to pay money. Never forget that people were trained to not pay to go to Canes games, because why would you? They papered the town. When they weren't making the playoffs and they were trying to get butts and seats, the thought process was, all right, we get butts and seats, you'll buy more beer. You get butts and seats, maybe you're going to buy some merch, right? But they got around to variable pricing, meaning that a Tuesday night's game against Calgary is not going to be the same as a Saturday night game against the Rangers. And that's where the season ticket price thing comes into play too, where, you're going to get your season tickets and we want you to pay the full freight. But this business of you picking your games as you go along, we're not doing that anymore, because they're trying to squeeze and maximize as much profit as they can. And
there's interest. It was never more clear, to anyone than on Saturday. We went to the state game in the morning, and there were actually more people there than I thought there would be.
2:00 on a Saturday,
But there was probably half of the building there.
Yeah.
And then we go at night, place was full. Place was full. Dallas is a good team. It was a Saturday night game, 8:00 game. Place was full.
What are we at? 50 straight sellouts or something like that? It was, I think, for the Carolina Hurricanes.
They're running hot
right now.
They're running hot.
I get the thought.
But it's an investment.
It is an investment. But I don't get that thought with the Panthers.
The Carolina Panthers. I
don't get that thought.
You have to probably put yourself back in the 2015, 16 mindset of when they're running hot. And what they're looking at is the NFL is running hot. So
salary cap just went up.
So do they care?
No.
In terms of if the Panther fans are the ones buying the tickets? Because remember last year how many times the place got taken over? They don't care who's there. They just care that the tickets sold. So there's a little bit of a different dynamic there. Also, football games are destination games. Hockey games are interest. Like, oh, it's a Tuesday, it's a Thursday. I want to go to a game. Let's go to the game. As a Saturday, a Sunday game, you're making a plan.
Yes.
You're going to go see the Panthers play. You're making a plan. You're a Bears fan. You're like, oh, November 12th, Bears are in town. We're going to that game. So the Panthers don't care. The Carolina Panthers, NFL doesn't care who buys the seats.
You say this all the time when it comes to NC State basketball. Tickets are sold.
Yeah.
Tickets are sold to PNC Arena.
And that's a different one, right?
Same with the PSL with the Carolina Panthers. Like, those tickets are sold at this point. All this is to say, there does come a point, and I am curious about this when it comes to sports. At what point people do start making decisions the same way they've been making decisions on where to go eat. When they start making decisions on what they're going to buy at the store. Because when things get to a price point where you're just like, I'm just not paying this anymore. There's got to be a better option. There's got to be a better way to entertain myself with my discretionary income, right? I am curious when we get to that point, because it's only getting more expensive to be a sports fan, not just in terms of ticket prices. I mean, we're just illustrating how expensive it is to go to a random hockey game on a Tuesday night, even with a free ticket. But it's coming for the streaming as well. This is why I'm fascinated by this sports Hulu that's about to arrive. That best estimate is going to be $50 minimum. I don't know who this is for, because I'm already paying for Hulu. I'm already paying for Bally Sports, right? Were you trying to watch the game last night, by the way?
Potentially.
On Bally?
Did it kick us out?
No, it kept giving me like some zip code error. I was like, oh, maybe Joe's trying to watch the game.
No,
you're in a different zip code.
No, I was watching. I watched State and Wake last night.
I don't have an answer for this. Is ultimately my point. I don't know what the answer is.
You're
just
getting
curious.
there, though.
I'm just curious at what's the inflection point where people, to the detriment of the sport, start saying, "I've had enough."
Don't forget how the pandemic changed this dynamic.
Yeah.
Okay. When we couldn't go to games, one of the first things that we wanted to do was let's go to games.
Yes.
And I think there is a post-pandemic afterglow that the Hurricanes have enjoyed. It coincides with their ability to be a good team. I want to go do something. Now we're getting further away from being trapped in your house. Now you're getting closer to making decisions based on what is economically best for me and
also,
how do I want to invest my expendable income.
Also experience too, because look at concert prices, right? Concert prices are through the roof, but people were happily paying. Where I would look at a Panthers ticket and go, what the hell am I paying for? But I look at Taylor Swift tickets, or I look at a band that I really want to go see, or these festivals. Like there's this Ocean's Calling Festival up in Ocean City, Maryland, that really is, as somebody put it on social media, the Coachella for Gen X, and older generations. I'm actually more willing to spend money on that than I am a sporting event because of the experience I'm getting in return. It's a spectacle to go to one of these stadium shows. It's a spectacle. At some point, you're going to look at, why am I dropping $800 as a family to go to a hockey game on a random Tuesday night? At some point, you have to make those decisions.
Right.
And I think the same was the NFL, especially as the NFL is a much better product on TV than it is in person. I mean, I don't know when the last time you went to an NFL game was.
2 years ago.
But it's much better on TV than it is in person.
Yeah.
And you're paying what exactly for this?
Even on TV this past year wasn't great.
I think that had something to do with the product. But regardless, it's one of those curiosities that I see as the price continues to go up and more is being asked of fans. When you look at how you're already strained enough in other places, decisions end up being made. And I am curious, what is the health of your sport going forward when you're pricing people out? This is where you and I will converge. You like to get on what time games start. All right.
Your favorite.
Your favorite thing. This game shouldn't be on at 8:45. Think of the children.
I literally slept for 2 hours before the state game last night.
That's funny. That is funny. I don't blame you, man. I was struggling last night watching that game. The real issue in turning away young fans when you're so obsessed with Gen Z, well, they care about sports. The only way to get them hooked is to have them come to games.
Yeah.
I used to think opposite, but the further I get away, and I see it with my own kids, the only way to get them involved is to bring them to the experience, because the experience is the thing. And when you keep pricing people out, there's less inclination to go out there and experience that. Anyway, just random thoughts as I see ticket prices continue to go up for a variety of reasons. Speaking of prices, breeze through, keeping it good for you when it comes to gas, keeping it good for you when it comes to the coffee, beer, snacks, etc. So hit up breeze through, locations across the triangle, right across from PNC Arena as well.
The dark roast coffee, I can't say it enough. It's just delicious.
And big thanks to Butcher's Market for sponsoring Ovia's and Gilio. Last night, Ovia's family secret, charred jalapeno chicken breast. The fajitas were on point as always. When the kids came out of their gaming dungeon, they're like, oh, you're making fajitas today, aren't you? I'm like, yes, indeed.
Delicious.
Let's go. Very excited about that. So head on over to Butcher's Market, locations across the triangle, new location, Lake Boone Shopping Center, and of course in Wilmington. We appreciate the Butcher's Market. Let's get out of here on some Hey Joe questions. You know the music. You know it's time to almost get out of here. Well, we do have some YouTube comments. We have some Twitter comments. I don't really want to get into that. What I want to get into is apparently I was not excited enough for you, Joe, on your backdoor hole-in-one, your greatest birdie of all time. I got a couple of tweets about this. I got a couple of comments on YouTube that apparently, like, what are you just... You should be happy for Joe. And I was like, I'm thinking to myself, I went back and I listened to it. And I thought to myself, no, I'm just listening to Joe's story. He's so excited about this. I'm just going to get out of the way and let him tell his story. But then this morning you tell me Yeah, you could have gotten a little bit more excited about that 7-iron.
I think you're. I mean, you use a what? You have a 9 wood.
I have a 9, and I just acquired a 15.
Yeah, so I would not expect you to be on the appreciation level of someone who just hit a 7-iron, 115 yards. Like the club is not made to go 115 yards. So the shot itself was like golf social media porn. Like if we had somebody filming it, it would be like, oh my God. But now you'd
be like Fat Perez.
Right. But to your point, like you didn't see the shot. So you didn't know how spectacular it really was.
No.
And you don't really appreciate nuance when it comes to golf either. I didn't expect that. I thought your reaction was fine. Like I had both sides of it. Like I had Jackson being like, well, that's kind of like all in one. Then my initial reaction was, well, obviously it's not. But then like I was workshopping through it and I was like, well, I literally have never hit a ball off, from a tee, set of tees into the hole before. So it will be memorable for me.
Okay.
But no, you're not the person I go to for golf nuance.
Okay. Thank you. I think people have been listening to this show enough, or they've heard us interact enough that y'all should know. Y'all should know that when it comes to golf, it's just kind of like when I'm talking about some nerdy video game and Joe just goes, But
cool. I would also like to point out though, they had a match. One of the matches recently it was Rory and Max Homa and Nelly Cordo. They had a 1 club challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I love the 1 club
I know
challenge.
you do.
So I was excited to see that.
All right. And to end the show, how we started it and how this week has gone. And when we show love to Wake Forest, there's a group of people who just absolutely want to dunk on you when they do the opposite. Here's Davis on social media. Steve Forbes, LOL. You still feel he's coach of the year? Dude, I was just making a joke, but you kind of proved my point. You proved my point from yesterday's show. Where it's like, hey, Steve's doing a pretty good job. Maybe we should talk. What? LOL. Okay, cool. And from Chris on social media. I mean, look, man. Again, I think this stuff is funny. When I had said, hey, man, Hunter Sallis, could he make it possible? Maybe ACC co-players of the year. He just puts his stat line with a big nope. I got it, Carolina fans. I got it, Carolina fans. Totally see where you're coming from on that.
Maybe we're doing it on purpose to help the heel and my ticket. Maybe.
Don't give away the game.
Maybe.
We will see you Thursday at the Sleek Fleet OG Live, 2:00 on YouTube. Podcast to follow. We'll see you then.